Hey everybody, welcome back to some more tier lists. Some people asked for it, and honestly, it's a very good idea, and I'm surprised I didn't think of it myself. Why not rank all the spec decks? So, rank mechanized decks, rank armor decks, etc., etc. But I thought about it a bit, and I will do it, but I'll essentially split the video up in two parts. As in, like, it's going to be one video, but there's first and second part. Because I feel like it's important to have a certain context for the ranking. Because it's not just about which is the strongest deck, right? I feel it is actually more important to talk about how a deck changes, becomes stronger or weaker when you take a certain specialization, which is what this part is about. It's also going to be a second tier list, which was not supposed to have this A, B, C. That's not C. D, E. There you go, that's better. But this is just a pure power ranking, right? Which is the strongest deck. I think in this case, this time around we're talking around Armored or about Armored. If I talked about mechs, sorry, I meant Armored. We're talking about Armored here. Tanks, tonks, leopards. Yeah. I think it is a lot more interesting to talk about, alright, which deck suddenly changes when you play a certain spec, which allows certain strategies, which is, sometimes useful, and which deck is basically just straight up worse. So this is what we're going to talk about first, and then at the end, I'll do a quick relative ranking to each other. Hopefully, if I remember, there's going to be chapters, so if you only care about the second part, you can just skip to that ahead. However, given the amount of decks, this is not going to be very in-depth, okay? Yeah. Also, of course, as always with tier lists, don't take this too serious, right? And a lot of people, or some people, I actually don't know what the split is here, but some people just treat tier lists, and sometimes I do that myself, as kind of like validation, right? They're thinking like, this deck is so good, and when they don't see somebody ranking it highly, they're like, what are they talking about? What an idiot, right? Don't take this too serious. Don't let me tell you, you shouldn't play something just because I say it's bad. At the end of the day, right? Just have fun. I don't care, really, how you build your deck, what you think is good, what you think is bad. Just have fun, right? And if you hate these videos, please don't watch them. Alright, or just, have them turn off the sound, have them in the second tab, so I get ad revenue and all that, right? But just don't watch them yourself. Either way, let's actually get into it. We're gonna start with Anzac. Again, I'll try to do this quick, but let's just briefly go over it. Anzac, I think, actually is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's stronger because you simply, with Anzac, right, you have 6 activation points, big AP bonus, percentage bonus. What's it called? Unit availability bonus. I actually don't know what this called, right? You get like 30% extra units. You have strong shock squads with the commandos. You basically lose wheels, Sasser, stuff like the Aslav. You don't lose anything in the support tab. You lose this Aslav, you lose NZ SAS. You lose the Vickers and the Aslav here as well, right? The thing is, what you gain is basically just veterans, and Ace-1 pluses. That is really 95% of what you get. The activation point reduction, right, for tanks, all of this is irrelevant. So, in practice, you lose very little, but you also gain very little. So, honestly, let's just put it here, right? It is kind of on the same level. I guess that's kind of what we have this tier for, but it doesn't really open up new strategies, but it also doesn't really remove much. It's kind of in a weird spot. Yeah. So I guess I didn't really go over the tiers, but I think hopefully they are relatively self-explanatory. This is when the deck is just better than unspec. This is basically when it's good. Oh god, voice crack. Holy, I shouldn't record this early in the morning. Real voice reveal over here. Situationally useful is the deck is good, and you might have some certain strategies or on certain maps, right? It's a very good choice, but not on like a overall basis, right? Keep in mind, I'm not just purely talking about 1 versus 1 ranked, which I often do, but in this case, it's not just about how if you where to build a ranked deck. This is taking into account, right, I know beforehand that I'm playing, let's say, on Bloody Ridge, and with my teammates, I talked with them, and we agreed that I would go for the big town, and as such, I want a deck that's good for towns, right? And in that case, a deck that is, I'd say, in good for any strategy or in situationally useful is very likely to be much stronger than your average deck that is just simply stronger than unspec, because why would I take an armor deck for a town fight, right? So, just to give like a quick overview, at least it plays differently is, it's not really stronger, but maybe it has like a wacky playstyle that can be fun. Even if it's weak, that doesn't mean it can't be fun, right? And I might as well play unspec is when it's just practically gain nothing, or the bonuses are so irrelevant and the penalties are so big that even for fun, there's just no real reason unless you just like punishments and you know. Okay, let's not get into that fetish, but you get the gist. All right, what's next? Blue Dragons. Blue Dragons, so they have a solid tank tab. The thing with Blue 4 is their armor decks don't really gain as much because they already have such high base accuracy most of the time that the extra veterancy is by no means useless, but it is, in my opinion, more noticeable on Red 4 tanks like T80s and such. The other thing is, usually you want something, you want like a cheap-ish tank with a very good AP and ideally mobility, like Leopard Ace 1 Plus, T80, right? Those are some prime examples that I like, the cheapish tanks that can be really strong on like elite spam. Don't really have that here. 9 chickies kind of are like that, but they're a bit slowish, on the slower side. And they are incredibly squishy. Usually you will fit in these two tanks. Every now and then you see some 9 chickies. Every now and then you might see a K1A1. But not very often. What do you lose though, right? You lose your Tansam, you lose your Kinsam. Especially the Tansam is quite a big deal. You do have the Hawkpip 2 for some pretty decent anti-helicopter, but it's not a Hawkpip 3, right? Hawkpip 3 has another 5% accuracy, another 175 meters versus helicopters. It's not quite on the same level. Your Specs, they're kind of have some mobility issues. Eho is okay, I guess. The K263 is very, very nice, of course, but it's not a very good offensive spec, like to protect your push. In my opinion, it just feels awkward because the support assets just aren't quite there for Blue Dragons Armored. Infantry-wise, you lose all your shocks. You have no shocks. These are Marines and motorized, and airborne, and support. These are Marines. Obviously, you have no elites. No elites in Armored ever. You have some good spam, though. The K200 spam is very great. KFVs are good. You have good man pads, you have great ATGM teams. So it's one of the better armored infantry tabs, right? The only thing you're really missing are some decent shocks, as well as infantry-based AT, right? All you get are basically Carl Gustavs. You lose your Panzerfaust 3s. I mean, I guess that's all you have, right? You don't have Carl Gustav M3s or anything else. You lose your Helping 90, which are your only good infantry-based AT. Or let's say, only top-tier infantry-based AT. Which is awkward, right? You don't get any Carl Gustav Fist squads here that can kind of help out there as well. It's a bit annoying. Recon tab wise, you lose your Tokyo-Onsa, which is, and your Ninja. Both of which are actually quite important to Blue Dragons. JSCF Rangers are okay, but they're one of the worst shock squads when it comes to the Recon tab. You lose Shinano, I guess I just show you, right? You don't have a lot of choice. KFV is okay, O60 is good, Rangers are fine, right? But it's more, yeah, it's lacking. Vehicle tab, you lose your Jeeps, but whatever. You still have the M36, which is great, because honestly, as good as this looks on paper, right? 15 points, 6 armor. It just has mobility issues. I also realized I should definitely get a move on and not talk too much. In short, the tank tab, again, kind of doesn't really gain that much. You can do some very fun stuff with Nana and Chickies. But I think I actually go for a good Furni strategy. Because very often in team games, you already run 2 Kiyomarus anyway. And maybe even a K1A1. So it's not like a deck where in team games you might suddenly go Armored just to get a bazillion tanks, like you could do with USSR or US. And that's pretty useful more often than not. You can kind of already do that with just Unspec. So I think if you want to do some Nani on cheeky stuff, right? Which can work. There's some stuff you could do there. But other than that, I don't know. Baltic front. Not the strongest tank tab. You have T-72S, Pave, and Wilk. Like, your medium heavies, whatever you want to call them. Pretty good lineup. You have like a, the glass cannon, if you will. And then you have the, let's say, the tank variant, and you have something in between with the M2 Wilk. But this has the speed and the armor, and this has the RPM, and reasonable armor and AP and such, right? It's a nice lineup. The top end just isn't quite there. Tuari can't keep up with Super Heavies. The mod, not quite, it's almost there. But the lack of stab and a bit less front armor is annoying. It also looks stupid. I'm sorry. The Matties, in reality, honestly, it's hard to really get them working. Like, sure, 17 AP, full range, 60% accuracy is actually really, really good for 50 points. But again, the mobility and lack of stabilizer, you can't just fast move across to the front line. I mean, you can, but you gotta be really wary that you don't, waste your shot. You need the speed to close the distance against heavy targets when you do something like this with these tanks, and you just can't. But you still have some very good chunks, right? You have, first of all, you have your spam with the Yakari, you have your Panzeri Yakari, you obviously get all the weapons teams, you get the Grom. You lose the KT, of course, which is a big deal. You don't have the best IFVs for armor, in my opinion. BMP2 is decent, but you don't get them with line infantry. You don't get like a Bradley or a Conqueror's M Slugger. Other than that, you lose your Salamandra, you lose your Erikois, of course. It's honestly it's a similar situation, I think, where in practice you just once again gain very little. I'm gonna put it here because it's not that much. It's not really weak, right? It actually doesn't really play it differently, but it's not that weak. And you still get like a solid choice of tanks which you can't all fit into an unspec deck. This is not a weak deck. Canada. What do you even lose? You lose your Shanks, Canadian Airborne, they're all wheeled. You lose your Highlanders. You don't have good spam with the M13s. You have some good tanks with the C2 and the C2 Maxes. But once again, like, those are really only 2 great tanks here. Mark 5 is fun. You use your Pathfinders, you still get your Chimera. I don't know. I'll be honest. You lose a lot in your infantry tab. The Canadian Airborne and the Highlanders are so crucial for Canada. It's a huge loss for them. Hold on, what's next? China. All right. China. CDC 853 is cool. 852A, 888A, they're fun and all. CDS 632 is very fun. I love this little bow tank. You have some good meat shields with the ZST 63C and a base Shanxi. You lose your special forces, of course. You lose your Lurandui. They're Marines only. You still have your tankers, but you lose a WC, which is actually a big deal. WC is quite important. You lose your HQ61, you lose your HQ7. You lose the 2 best units you kind of have in this deck, right? Those are top tier units, and you lose them both. You lose your strongest anti-air assets that you're basically always gonna run. PGC is very, very strong. It has really good DPS, but it has 1 armor. And unlike a Tunguska or something, which by the way also has 2 armor, it has Mistral, which is amazing. But when you play 70 points and you have to get it pretty close to the front line to actually protect anything, that's where it becomes squishy. It's such a strong unit that's just lacking a little bit of survivability. You lose your C5s, but you still get your leader in. I think, is this... No, it's just in mech, okay. Sometimes these are in armored. Get your CTQ, you get your leader in. Obviously, as always, you keep your planes, right? That's something to keep in mind. I don't know. You lose quite some stuff. I think I'm just gonna put it in at least placed differently. You can probably make some stuff work with like CTS spam, which is fun and all, but I don't think it really offers like a whole new strategy. You can't really lean into heavy tanks because you only get, I think, 5 in China. So it's not like you can spam those out. Yeah. Commonwealth next. I love me some Commonwealth. Commonwealth Armored is just a little baby of mine. Obviously, tank section is great. Not amazing because you are lacking some really fast, well-armored tanks. You don't have any T-72s. You don't have any Leopard 2s that have like 70 or even 80 kmh with like a 20 armor or something, or even more. You just have no fast tanks, period, right? I think the fastest you get are Scorpions, but those are like obviously like 30 points max. And next best thing is probably one of those Leopards at 65. Yeah, and the max is 60. So your tanks are slow as F. You have the Commandos 90. You have Fusilier 90s. You lose out on SAS, of course. Overall, though, I think you lose Highlanders, but Fusilier 90s mostly make up. I still prefer to have Shocks with good AT, or have Highlanders 90, but Fusilier 90s do fill the spot. Support tab, you lose your Wolverine, but other than that, not really much, if anything. And a Bison mortar. But I think those are the only two you lose, so... Wolverine is annoying, but for an armor deck that is slow already, not a huge deal, I think. Recon tab, you don't get any special forces. Recon tab is just weak, right? It sucks, but it sucks in unspec already. Not having Aslabs, not having wheeled like Bisons or something is annoying. Pathfinders are good for town fighting, so that sucks. No Lynx H7s, no Vickers, no Aslab Toe 2s, no Lynx 3s, whatever. Nobody cares about that. I'll be honest. I'm almost tempted to put it into a stronger than unspec, but I think that's my too biased of me. But situational useful easily, right? When you're playing on Bloody Ridge and you know you're going mid or something, and it's a 4v4 because nobody plays Bloody Ridge in a normal way. Everybody just plays 4v4s on that cursed map, or 4v4s on 2v2 paddy field. Tank spam is just necessary, and Commonwealth Armored is very good for that. CSSR Armored actually very fun. You lose your shocks as always, not as always, but as it is for many decks. And as such, you lose your only good AT, which isn't amazing, but it's still 24 AP, and on shocks at least. And you lose the Lekas, and you lose the MI17s, which are usually very crucial. You lose your Osas, but you have the Kubem 4 and the Stratanum, which is fine. You lose the Ondava, but people aren't guys good enough. You still have honestly the best 5HE mortar in the game, in my opinion, because it just carries so much ammo. Moderna benefits, you get 2 cards of T72Ss, T72M, 1Ms, Dynas. Dyna I usually hate, but in Armored it's good, because with the Veteran CDR can becomes really strong. M1M is already good, and then on Veteran or Elite even, the Sphere, very, very good. Realistically, you don't gain that much, and you lose quite a bit. But I think it's a fun deck. And you can also, like, at least it plays differently, right? These are also still, like, fun tiers, right? Obviously, on higher tiers, they all still play differently most of the time. It's just hard to really, evaluate this properly. This doesn't necessarily mean it's worse than this in like a fun ranking, right? Baltic Armor doesn't actually play that differently, let's be real. CSSR, I'd say good for niche strategy. Like, on the very rare occasion where, I know I'm gonna play on a very open field against possibly a deck that doesn't have very high armor, so all those Fear and Archons are gonna be very useful. Let's say, like, Floods the mid part, a big 1-pointer, or is it a 2-pointer, right? If you remember that map, nobody plays on it anymore, but every now and then, right, if you just need a bunch of high vet tank-based ATGMs, yeah, go for it. Denmark is next. You lose the FKP and the Lynx. You lose these guys because I'm pretty sure this is not an Armored. You lose the egg. Yeah, it's just you don't lose much, but you lose some very strong units. But you practically gain nothing. Yeah, you get Leopard 185s, but it's not like they're the AS1 Plus, right? Which is 10 points cheaper. Like, I might have been biased with Anzac, you know, I'm gonna put it a bit down here maybe. Or maybe down here actually. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? The veterancy on the AS1 Plus doesn't suddenly transform the deck. I was very biased there with that. I'll be honest. And honestly, yeah, I'm sorry. Look, Anzac Armored isn't bad, but why would you play it over Anzac on Spec? Why did they put it up there? I'm sorry. Anyway, DGC is next. You have of course all the leopards. I accidentally select South Africa instead of Netherlands. You get your Marder 2s, you get your Pentagram 90s, you get your Sotrip 95. Yes, you lose Fallschirmjäger 90s. That's honestly whatever. Losing Core Marine 95 is a bigger deal. You have amazing spam, mid skills, you lose your wheeled Roland and like Lars or two. Other than that, not much. Leopards, none of them are like truly amazing, but they're all just like Leopard 2s, but they're all just very solid. I feel like nothing about them is just, oh yeah, they're you know the best for this or the best for that. That's in my opinion never the case, but they're also never the worst. It's just they're always just solid. It's nothing great, but nothing really horrible about them either. I guess the side armor on the base Leopard 2 is not that great, but other than that, you get a canning. You don't have Shock Recon, which is honestly annoying, but yeah, realistically, while it isn't, I would not say stronger than Unspec, definitely in the situation useful. Similarly to Commonwealth Armored, if you just need ton of tank spam, that's a good deck to choose. Eastern Bloc next. Eastern Bloc, I think, is a very similar boat. Get lots of heavy tanks, not necessarily super heavies, but get 6 cars of T-72Ss and another 2 of the S1. So you just can fill almost your entire tank depth just with those, which is pretty funny. You still have your Mordschützen. You lose LSTR, which are actually very important for Eastern Bloc for multiple reasons. And it's my favorite unit in the game, probably. Support tab, you still get your Never in this case as well, which I prefer. The armor is really nice, protecting it against howitzers and such. Recon tab. You don't get them. For some reason, they're not an armor. I always forget. I'm always uncertain. You don't get Pizzella of Clara. You get Pruskunici, which is something. Recon tab is gonna be really weak, which it is already not the strongest for Eastern Bloc. The main strength in the Recon tab really is the Specialny and the MI17s and the Salamantra. But you do get a Snezhka, which is nice. But overall, once again, that goes for a lot of coalitions, right? Like 3 or 2 nation coalitions. Situationally useful. You got so many heavy tanks. In that case, it can be very, very good. Eurocor. Probably in the same boat. The only thing France really adds, I'm gonna look at France here, right? You get the Leclerc, which is the biggest deal. Oh, do get the MXN RCSP in Armored, which is really nice, I guess. The LRM. Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe I was underestimating its impact a bit. Sometimes just a few key units are all that deck needs, right? You get a heavy RTGM if you want. Just like with Netherlands, you get the reservists in a very strong 5-pointer. MX13 as well, just a different one. And you get some planes here, right? You get a Rafale. So you know what? Yeah. It doesn't have the same tank presence as TGZ, but it has some stronger support assets, right? Rafale for air superiority to protect your tanks. LRM is very, very strong. You can't field as many heavy tanks, but the support assets for your tanks, quite strong. And for your teammates. East Germany. Okay, we kind of went over this with Eastern Bloc, so let's get a move on here, right? You still got your Mordschützen, a bunch of T-72Ss. In general, Red 4 tanks, of course, gain more unless they're Finnish or Yugoslav, because they gain extra accuracy for reasons. Niche strategy? Yeah, maybe. Because you still actually can, like, grind infantry and such very well. Realistically, all you really lose are LSTR. Of course, wheeled axes and such, but usually you run your modules and track stuff either way. So practically all you lose are LSTR, which is a big deal though. Like it is a huge deal. So I wouldn't put it in stronger than Unspec at any point. Entente. I don't think it's stronger than Unspec. Like look at M84A's 65% accuracy. VHOR 70% accuracy, right? You lose your Nevas. You have the Cups. You lose your Plummen, but you have the Priest. You gain you still have all the BVPs. You have all the Proletari, but you lose your Padelbranzi 90. You had to have the M84AN, of course. But honestly, it's similar. You lose quite a bit. Sorry, I was not turning this off. But very high accuracy tanks, definitely situationally useful. Finland. You can probably make something with paves, but again, you have already very high base accuracy. You don't gain that many tanks. I feel like it's similar to China, but you still have your Panzerjägeri, you have your Jägeri, you have some good stuff, but it's not stronger. I can't think of like a reasonable strategy for Finland where it's like a map or a situation where it's better to play in Armored than Unspec, really. And it's even on something like Mudfight in a 1v1, you'd much rather have KTs to get the opening, to put spikes down everywhere, right? Because you really won't have more tanks. Mod and a Pave, the only strong tanks, like or high tier tanks, let's put it, you get one card anyway. So France, I don't think it's very good. You get a Leclerc, and the AMXs have no armor. You lose your Rima, you lose the Legion 90, you lose the Kommandospara, you lose your Panthers, you lose your Tigers, you lose your Recon AMX 10, you lose your VAP T20. It's not very good. Israel, I played Israel Armored a while ago. That was honestly very fun. You lose your Maglands, of course, right? You lose your Shaitat, you lose your Nimrod. Sanhanim as well. You only get light infantry. The tanks do have already pretty good like accuracy and all, but they're not that slow, at least 60k mage. And they're very often just sitting ducks because of how slow they are, but at the very least the high veterancy helps a bit with recovering veterancy, but they're all very tanky. Magach is just an S tier tank, it's an amazing tank. But again, they don't really need the veterancy. You only get one card of these, right? Realistically, it's not that strong. So yeah, I mean, again, realistically, you don't gain that much, right? The extra slots in the tank cap aren't just useful. That's just the thing with armored decks, right? Wargame is an infantry-centric game, in my eyes. And in many situations, the only time you want more tanks is when you can field more heavy tanks. If you can't, then very often infantry or IVs will just take over the role that, let's say, 50 points and lower tanks do. Or recon units. That's just a sad reality. Now, Japan. Japan is actually funny. Because with Japan, yeah, I always forget that. Let's look this up. Japan. No, they are the ones with the. I always forget which it's Korea or Japan with the 1070 Kinsam. I'm never certain. I guess I should know because only Japan has like the Kinsam and Kyumaru. Like those are just numbers, right? I think Kyumaru is like 90. Nanayon is what, 84 or 74 or something? And like this is like in it's called the Type 9 and it's like a Type 74, right? I don't know what this is. Either way. This is funny because you get 6 Kyumarus in Japan. Which again, you don't really need armored for, but it's just funny. I don't know, it's just a big fun fact. You have 6 veteran Kyumarus. That's just funny. Again, you could just do unspec and they're almost as effective, but it's just the psychological aspect. I'm sorry. It's pretty good for new strategy. Let's be realistic though. But it's just funny. Landshut. Okay, so over unspec, again, Denmark is kind of in this aspect. West Germany is probably somewhere up there. And together they're probably in good for niche strategy. Because West Germany alone only is a 2A5 and 2 cars of 2A4s. Those are the only two like really heavy tanks. And then you are down to 2A1s. And when it comes to cheap tanks, I guess you have like the Centurion Mark V that Denmark gives, but other than that, blah. So if you really need like a heavy tank, like some, let's say it's not like a full on, let's say you're playing, I don't know, 2E2 on Paddy. You might need quite some heavy tanks, but you might need some good infantry and such as well. Then yeah, maybe that's a good reason, right? Liftguard and such are good, right? NATO, stronger than Unspec. Because when it comes to NATO and packed Unspec, their main bonus is really the AP reduction, so they can fit more units into the deck. Of course, NATO also has a good selection of units, but you have only 405 activation points as opposed to 55 in a coalition and 16 in a nation. So that is a big deal. And I hope that already tells you everything you need to know. I'm not gonna go over every single like tab where you gain and lose what, right? I hope this goes more or less without saying. North Korea. All right, let's take a look at it. You actually lose quite a bit in the infantry tab. You lose all your shocks and elites, and as such, you're only decent AT. The spam is BT-50 does have 2 armor and a heavy MG, but it's also slow, right? 45 kmh. Don't underestimate having only 1 side armor. MX10 in the side and the shit and the stuff and the like, I guess, will just one-shot you to the side. That's really annoying. Support tab, you lose a Ponge 2, which on paper is a bad unit, but it's also cheap. And the only long range A you have. You get your T90 and the John Maho 5 pretty high veterancy, and I guess the Strela tanks and the Type 59-1 if you want to spam that, but you have no recon infantry. I mean, to be fair, North Korea on its own is already pretty bad, right? Let's put it here. There might be some situation where like having a bunch of Strela tanks is actually really, really good, okay? I'm not gonna deny that. Having those high bet Strelas could be quite the asset. The Netherlands. Netherlands and Germany are gonna be very similar. Netherlands lose, of course, a corpse and a KCTs. But I still think they're kind of more like here. Although they do get a 2A4NL, as opposed to the 2A4 that West Germany has. But it's kind of a similar thing, really. It's not like very often. Maybe I should rename this. This sounds very similar, but you get what I mean, right? This is more often useful. This is like rarely useful, right? Yeah, I think this makes sense. NORAD definitely up here because of all the M1 Abrams you can spam, but of course, and of course mainly for US, you lose your longbow. You lose your Patriot. You lose your attack arms if you roll that. And since you're already playing NORAD, you lose all the Canadian stuff as well, right? But of course, all the HA spam, all the HCs, the M1A2s, and even the M1A1s, there's a lot of heavy tanks, buddy. No, oh God, Norway. I mean, to be fair, Scandinavian shock squads, or like Liftguard and Stormer, they're in Armored as well. You get a CV90, but you lose all your Eric's. That I guess you instead of the Fist Eric's. You lose a NASAMs. Use your. I guess you don't lose that much, but you don't have much to begin with, and what little you lose is actually quite impactful. Fallschirmjäger and Andy are just ridiculously good, and you don't gain much. 1 in 5 NO2 is the only really good tank you have, and you have only one card of it other ways. So, Pact is in a very similar situation to NATO. It's mainly about the activation points, and of course, picking all the non-prototypes. You have a huge selection, strong selection. So easy up there. Poland, probably here. You get M2 Wilk, T72S, 240, M1 Wilk. Infantry wise, you lose quite a bit, but I think it's in a very similar thing with CSSR. Sure, you don't have the M1M, but you have again the M2 Wilk as opposed, to make up for that. You lose your shocks. You lose your wheels. You have some BMP2s. Conkers as well. You lose your Salamandra. You have shocks. In the recon type at least. But you have Neva. You have Strela. You have Pivonka. You don't have any higher, like S tier or like very modern artillery to begin with. So that's not a big loss. Oh, but you don't have mortar. No, I forgot. You don't have mortars. I mean, it's Poland in general. But for an armor deck, that's actually very important. I'll be honest. I'm sorry. I mean, it already has enough to begin with, right? It's not like, yeah, Anspec doesn't have mortars either, so it doesn't really make sense to compare to Anspec to put it down there, right? Red Dragons. Red Dragons is actually kind of fun. Because you get the at least best differently from China. And you get like your T90s, you get your Chun Mahos. And then you can actually fill the tank tab. Scandi. The thing with Scandi is, I think I'm actually gonna put it down here. Like, you have like three tanks to choose from that you're gonna put into your Scandi tank tab most of the time. You're gonna put in the 1-2-1, 1-3D, and 1-5 NO2. Sometimes you see the M48A1. That's actually a good tank. Even in NATO Anspec, you actually run this sometimes. Sorry, NATO Armored. I think that's about it. Sorry. You lose quite a bit. South Korea. K1s, K1A1s. No. That's about it. One card of K1A1s, 2 cards of K1s. You get like the 17 AP M48, I guess, but that doesn't transform your deck. You lose your Haebyung. You lose your Taekyeonsa, right? That's just too big of a deal. South Africa, they do get armored. It's not a very strong armor deck because you lose a ton of stuff. So, but it does actually play differently though. But yeah, no, let's put it on here. Like, come on. You got Logem and the Roykats and Olifants on high vet, and you lose a ton of stuff in infantry tab. It's not worth it. They already have very high accuracy, so there's no reason really. Sweden, okay, Sweden is fun because you get like 8 S tier V1-2-1s. And honestly, but I mean, you already get that in Unspec, right? But when you feel that many super heavies or heavy tanks, I should say, the veterancy is gonna be quite nice because then it's just gonna be like not just consistent, but just they're never gonna miss. UK is kind of up here because of all the challengers. US is also up here. Soviets is also up here, right? They just have a ton of heavy tanks. That alone already puts them up here. Because again, if you play 4v4 on Bloody Ridge, which is more common than one might think, maybe not what you think because you played it all the time, I don't know you, then just having 5 cards of heavy tanks is all you need. It's still a very strong support assets. USSR doesn't have good meat infantry, but it didn't have that to begin with. But you get so many heavy tanks there. So yeah, West Germany is here. Yugoslavia, honestly, as well. They already have very base accuracy, but you still got all the PvP and such, right? And you lose it out on the Czech tanks, which is the main contributor in Armored, as well as the Kub M4. So yeah, I think that looks decent, right? All these decks are like, they're perfectly fine to play, and every now and then, sure. More often than not, Anzac is gonna perform very, very similar, if not better. Simply because, you have a lot of heavy tanks, but most of the time you can fit them into an Anzac deck as well. Here you just have so many heavy tanks that you just, you can fill out the entire tank, basically the entire tank tab with just 100+ point tanks, most of the time. Here the activation point reduction is just so huge that, yeah. In this case, right, you have like 2 tanks that you're ever gonna use anyway. So why would you choose to play Armored? But it can be fun, I guess, with some niche scenarios. Maybe you want to spam some certain cheap tanks. And in this case, it's just, nah. You lose so much. Okay, this is gonna be like the, compared to Unspec. And let's do like a quick rundown of what are the S tier Armored tanks, right? This is, ignoring the context of this, right? This is just purely how do they compare to meta decks, right? The decks in here, I guess I should name it like S, A, B, C, D. S tier means they're top tier in ranked, top tier in general, right? This is not, this is the best. This also means, of course, these are the best armor decks, but this means these decks have to keep up with Entente Mech, USA, USSR, Eurocor, Baltic Motor, right? On top of it, of course, being relative to each other. So, Blue Dragons, it's not that good. I'll be honest. Anzac is obviously very weak. Baltic is still reasonably strong, honestly. Canada is very weak. China is not that great. Commonwealth, honestly, high B tier. CSSR is gonna be something like there. Denmark, honestly, could be very low C tier just because of other medics. I'm just gonna quickly do this, and then I'm gonna do it more detailed in a bit when everything's like a bit on the field. DGC Armored is, you're not gonna see a lot of S and A tier because they are situationally very, very good armor decks, but on average, right? This is talking about average and 1v1 ranked, and let's say you don't know that. You might know, okay, it's a 4v4, but you don't know the map before and stuff like that, right? Let's say you can't prepare or can't take into account what your opponent is playing, right? That's kind of also what plays into this. Like, basically in almost any possible situation. And that includes 1v1 ranked and like 2v2s on actual 2v2 maps and such, where heavy tanks and super heavies are important, but not the be-all end-all anymore. Eastern Bloc Armored is quite good. Eurocor is okay. Probably worse than Baltic. Sweden is fun. East Germany kind of works. Okay, Antal might actually be S tier though. Yugoslavia probably A tier. Finland, not that great. France, not that great. Finland's worse. Israel is honestly quite strong. Maybe even A tier. Japan. Honestly, maybe even better than Blue Dragons because you get more Q-Marus. Landjut, you don't lose that much. NATO could be S tier. So PAC definitely is. NATO, I'm not sure if S tier or high A tier. North Korea could probably be somewhere down here. Because I think at this point they might actually be stronger than Anspec. Because if you can actually, because at that point you can kind of make up for the holes in your deck by just being able to spam very high veterancy tanks, because they're going to be much more effective suddenly, and then your ground and tank presence is so strong that the weakness that you usually have when you play North Korea can sort of be ignored sometimes, as weird and stupid as it might sound. Netherlands. Norway is can honestly still be A tier. The air type alone just carries it in a bit. Norway is really bad. Poland is not great. Like, not having a mortar when you're playing Armored, come on. Red Dragons, probably high C tier. I'm honestly probably better than Blue Dragons Armored. Scandi is honestly still quite strong. Like Beacon and Lift Garden and Dragoner. You lose your Erixes, but you still have some strong units, man. South Korea, somewhere in there. South Africa. Africa. Not very good. Hemomancer. UK could be honestly B tier. Maybe not. US high B tier, maybe. And then again, doesn't really lose. Like, come on, what does Nord actually give you, right? You lose 5 activation points. USSR can be up here. It might actually be low. It's very strong in team games, but in 1v1s it can really struggle because you don't have those strong 5-pointers to meet shield. All right. This looks kind of okay. Again, if this is what you care about more, let me know. Then I'll make the other thing quicker and talk more about this. But I think this is actually more interesting than this. So this is why, also we're like 47 minutes into the video, okay? So this is why I think this, just very roughly, right, at the end, if you just want rough guidance, right, how does this compare to, let's say, meta decks? This, of course, takes both 1v1 and team into account. I'm not gonna make a separate 1v1 and team game thing. And yeah, I think this is a lot more interesting, and I have a lot more to add to that, I think. So yeah. So that's it. Let me know what you think, if you want me to change something up here. And I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Bye bye.